John Whalen, a successful millionaire, sat in his opulent penthouse, staring out at the city lights below. It was Christmas Eve, and the excitement of the holidays felt distant. His calendar had been filled with parties, charity events, and glamorous gatherings. But now, as he sat alone, the weight of solitude began to sink in. His friends had all canceled, most of them caught up in their own celebrations or last-minute plans. The lavish dinner he had planned for the evening felt unnecessary now. After all, what good was all this wealth if it couldn't fill the emptiness he was feeling? He glanced at his phone, half-heartedly scrolling through messages. Nothing seemed to hold any real meaning. As he was about to put the phone down, one message caught his eye. It was from Sarah, his housekeeper. He had hired her over a year ago, and while they maintained a strictly professional relationship, there was something about her presence that he admired. She had a warmth and kindness that seemed to radiate even when she was just cleaning his home. "Mr. Whalen, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to extend an invitation to you for Christmas dinner at my home, if you're free. It would mean a lot to us. Merry Christmas." John paused. It was a simple message, an invitation that seemed so genuine, so unexpected. He had never once considered spending the holiday with his staff, let alone at Sarah's modest home. But as he reread the message, something tugged at him. He had spent so many Christmases in the company of the same wealthy faces, attending lavish parties filled with small talk and shallow interactions. He had everything one could possibly want, except for the sense of connection, of true warmth that came from meaningful human relationships. His eyes drifted to the clock on the wall. It was getting late, and all his plans had fallen through. Maybe a change of pace wouldn't be so bad. He could decline, of course, but then he'd be left with another lonely evening, another empty celebration. Maybe this is exactly what I need, John thought to himself. He had nothing to lose. He typed a quick reply, trying to keep the tone casual. "Thank you for the kind offer, Sarah. I'll take you up on that. See you soon." He didn't know exactly what he was expecting. Sarah's home was on the outskirts of the city, far from the luxury of his high-rise apartment. He knew it wouldn't be anything extravagant, but part of him felt curious. What could this woman, his employee, offer that the countless other parties and gatherings hadn't? As John drove out of the city, the bright lights slowly faded behind him. The roads became quieter, the air crisper. He found himself glancing at the street signs as they turned into a neighborhood that was far more modest than his own. The houses here were small, old but well kept. John couldn't help but feel a twinge of discomfort. He was used to grand entrances, to places where the world was catered to his every whim. Yet here he was driving to a place where he was just a guest, no one special, no one important. When he arrived at Sarah's house, it was a small, cozy cottage, decorated with simple, yet elegant holiday lights. He could already hear laughter and the faint sound of Christmas music coming from inside. The contrast between his luxurious apartment and this little home made him feel more out of place than he had anticipated. As he stepped out of the car, Sarah opened the door with a warm smile on her face, her eyes shining with genuine happiness. "Mr. Whalen, welcome," she said, greeting him in a way that made him feel more like an old friend than an employer. John gave her a polite smile. "I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to experience a real Christmas dinner." Sarah chuckled softly, gesturing for him to come inside. "I'm glad you could make it. Come in, please. It's not much, but it's home." The warmth from inside the house wrapped around him like a soft blanket. It was the kind of warmth that he had almost forgotten existed, the kind that didn't come from money or status, but from genuine care and love. He stepped inside, taking in the simple but welcoming surroundings. The living room was decorated with homemade ornaments. A small tree stood in the corner, its lights twinkling softly. There were a few other people in the room, Sarah's family, he presumed. They looked up when he entered, smiling warmly but not awkwardly. There was no pretense, no formality. It was as if he was simply one of them, invited into their celebration with open arms. "Everyone, this is Mr. Whalen," Sarah introduced him. "He was kind enough to join us for dinner tonight." John nodded, giving a friendly smile. He hadn't expected such a warm reception. They seemed so genuine, so unaffected by the world outside. They weren't interested in his wealth or his connections. They were interested in him as a person. He realized how rare that was. The night unfolded with laughter, stories, and the sharing of a humble but delicious meal. John found himself talking and laughing more than he had in months. There was no talk of business, no need to impress anyone. It was a simple evening of human connection. And as the night wore on, he realized that for the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of belonging. As he sat at the dinner table, surrounded by Sarah's family, the warmth in the room enveloped him. He began to understand something that had always eluded him. It wasn't the grand dinners or the expensive gifts that made Christmas special. It was the people you shared it with, the laughter, the love, and the simple moments that made you feel alive. John wasn't sure what he was looking for when he agreed to come to Sarah's home. But as the evening went on, he began to realize that this was exactly what he had needed all along. The night wasn't just about escaping his loneliness. It was about finding something real, something he had forgotten existed. And it all started with a simple invitation to dinner. The evening had been more than John could have expected. It wasn't the lavish surroundings he was used to, nor was it the superficial chatter of high society gatherings. Instead, it was real, raw, simple, and genuine. As John sat at Sarah's modest dining table, surrounded by her family, he felt like an outsider in a world that made more sense than his own. The conversation had flowed easily, with Sarah's family asking about his work and life, but in a way that was more interested than prying. They didn't care about his wealth, the stock market, or the latest business venture. Instead, they wanted to know about him, his passions, his dreams, his thoughts. It was such a foreign feeling to him that for a moment, he wasn't sure how to respond. When was the last time anyone had asked him those kinds of questions? He realized he didn't remember. "Tell us, Mr. Whalen," Sarah's brother-in-law, Tom, asked with a warm grin. "What do you do for fun? What makes you tick?" John was taken aback. Fun? That word had seemed so far out of reach lately. His life had revolved around work, meetings, and endless obligations. The idea of fun seemed like a luxury he had long ago forgotten. "Well," John began hesitantly, "I used to like hiking and traveling, but I guess I haven't had much time for that lately." "Sounds like you need a break," Sarah's mother chimed in with a knowing smile. "I always say, life isn't about how much you have, but about the memories you make." Her words resonated deeply within him. John had been so focused on accumulating wealth, achieving success, that he had forgotten to focus on the simple joys of life, the memories, the people, the shared moments that filled the heart, not just the bank account. As the evening progressed, John began to realize that this was a completely different world from the one he was used to. Sarah and her family were warm, kind, and present in a way that he hadn't experienced in years. There were no distractions, no worries about the next deal, the next event, the next opportunity. They simply enjoyed each other's company. It was humbling, but as the evening wore on, John couldn't help but notice Sarah. She moved through the house with grace, making sure everyone was comfortable, refilling drinks and checking on the food. She was the heart of the home, strong, nurturing, and constantly putting others first. There was something captivating about her, something that went beyond her role as his housekeeper. As John watched Sarah interact with her family, he couldn't help but admire her strength and the way she cared for those around her. There was no pretension, no need to impress. She simply was, and in that simplicity, he found something that felt so right, so real, that it made him question everything he had come to know about relationships and success. "Sarah, I have to say," John spoke up after a quiet moment, "I didn't expect tonight to feel like this." She turned to him with a smile, her eyes softening. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," John said, pausing to gather his thoughts. "It's just you've created something here that I didn't know I was missing. A kind of warmth. It's not about the material things, the grand gestures. It's about real connection, isn't it?" Sarah's smile widened, and she gave a small nod. "Yes, that's exactly it. We don't need a mansion to be happy. It's the people, the moments we share, the love we give." John leaned back in his chair, taking in her words. He hadn't realized just how much he'd been searching for something like this. A sense of belonging, of being part of something genuine. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was in the right place. The night continued with laughter, stories, and heartfelt conversation. At one point, they all gathered around the living room, sharing their favorite Christmas memories. It was a far cry from the expensive parties he was used to, where everyone posed with their best smiles and pretended to care. Here, with Sarah and her family, there was no need to impress. It was just people sharing their lives, their joys, their vulnerabilities. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah's mother handed John a small, homemade gift. It wasn't much, just a hand-knit scarf, simple and warm. But to John, it felt like the most meaningful gift he had ever received. It was a symbol of something real, something that couldn't be bought with money or success. "Thank you," John said, touched by the gesture. "This means more than you know." Sarah's mother smiled warmly. "It's not about the gift, dear. It's about the thought behind it, and the memories we create together." As John left Sarah's home that evening, he felt a profound shift within himself. The lavish life he had built for himself suddenly felt hollow in comparison. He had everything anyone could want: wealth, status, success, but it had come at the cost of meaningful relationships, of true connection. For the first time in years, John Whalen felt like he had found something more important than all the money in the world. He had found a family, a sense of belonging, and most unexpectedly of all, he had found a glimpse of a life that was far richer than anything he had ever imagined. And that was only the beginning. John couldn't shake off the feeling that something had shifted within him that night. The words Sarah's mother had spoken echoed in his mind, lingering long after he had left her house. "It's the people, the moments we share, the love we give." It was something he hadn't truly understood until now. His life, up until this point, had been centered around things: houses, cars, designer suits, business deals, and all the other trappings of success. But now, in the quiet moments when he was left alone with his thoughts, he found himself questioning it all. What was the point of it all if it didn't bring real connection? The next day, John couldn't concentrate on his work. His usual rhythm of back-to-back meetings, endless emails, and decision-making felt empty. His mind kept drifting back to Sarah's house. The warmth of the home, the sound of laughter, the simplicity of a family gathering around the table. There was a peace there he couldn't deny, a peace he'd been craving without even realizing it. He decided to take a walk, hoping to clear his mind. As he strolled down the streets of the city, he thought about Sarah. It was strange, but in the few hours he'd spent at her house, he had felt more alive than he had in years. She had this way about her, a calm confidence, a quiet strength. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. And yet, in her own subtle way, she had changed him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ping of his phone. It was a message from Sarah. "Hey, John, I hope you made it home okay. I was thinking about how much fun we had last night. Thanks again for joining us." John smiled as he read the message. He felt a rush of gratitude toward her. She had no idea how much her words had impacted him. Without thinking too much about it, he quickly typed a response. "It was a memorable night, Sarah. I've been thinking about it all day. Thank you for inviting me into your home. It was exactly what I needed." He hesitated before hitting send, then decided to add one more line. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime this week? I'd love to continue our conversation." John stared at the screen for a moment before pressing send. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but something told him that this was a moment he couldn't let slip by. For the first time in a long while, he wanted to connect with someone, to talk about things that were more than just business, more than just the superficial. He didn't have to wait long for her reply. "I'd love that, John. How about Thursday afternoon? I know a little cafe downtown." A grin spread across his face. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed the feeling of anticipation, the feeling of getting to know someone without any agenda. This was new for him, but it felt right. He quickly agreed to meet on Thursday. As the days passed, John found himself eagerly looking forward to their meeting. He could feel the weight of his past life beginning to lift. The more he thought about Sarah, the more he realized that she wasn't just a housekeeper. She was something more, something he hadn't allowed himself to see before. She was strong, intelligent, and kind, qualities he hadn't appreciated in anyone for a long time. It wasn't just her beauty that drew him in. It was the way she made him feel when he was around her. She made him want to be a better man, not because she expected it, but because her mere presence made him realize that he had been living a life that lacked meaning. Finally, Thursday came, and John found himself at the cafe Sarah had suggested. It was a quaint little place with soft lighting, rustic wooden tables, and the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. John arrived early, unsure of what to expect, but also excited about the possibilities. He didn't have to wait long before Sarah arrived. She walked in with the same calm confidence that had impressed him the other night. She smiled as she spotted him and walked over to his table. "Hey, John." She greeted him warmly, taking a seat across from him. "It's so good to see you again." John smiled back, feeling a sense of ease that he hadn't felt in a long time. "It's great to see you too, Sarah. Thanks for meeting me." They ordered coffee and began chatting. It was natural, easy, and comfortable. They talked about everything, their favorite books, childhood memories, and their thoughts on life. It was a conversation that felt real, unforced, and it felt like time slowed down in the best way possible. With Sarah, there was no need to impress. There was no competition, no ulterior motive. It was just two people talking, sharing, and listening. The conversation eventually turned to deeper topics. What they wanted out of life, what made them happy. Sarah opened up about her own struggles, her dreams for the future, and how she had always wanted to give her family a better life. She spoke of the sacrifices she had made, the long hours she had worked, and the challenges she had faced. John couldn't help but be moved by her words. She had been through so much, yet she carried herself with such grace. "I've always believed," Sarah said, her eyes meeting his, "that the little moments are what make life worth living. We spend so much time chasing after big things, but in the end, it's the small things, the people, the moments that really matter." John sat quietly for a moment, absorbing her words. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly understood. There was no pressure, no pretense. It was just two people connecting on a level that was far deeper than anything he had experienced before. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft but sincere, "I think you're right. I've spent so much time focusing on the wrong things. I've neglected what really matters." She smiled, her expression gentle. "It's never too late to change, John." For the first time in a long time, John felt hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the wealth and status he had chased for so long. Hope that he could find a new path, one that led to something more meaningful, something more fulfilling. As the weeks passed, John found himself reflecting more and more on the conversations he had shared with Sarah. Their meetings became a regular occurrence, and each time they spent together, he felt the weight of his past life slowly fade away. The world he had once known, filled with meetings, deals, and superficial connections, felt increasingly distant. The more time he spent with Sarah, the more he realized how empty his former life had been. He had been searching for fulfillment in all the wrong places. Sarah had opened his eyes to the beauty of simplicity, the value of kindness, family, and the small moments that brought joy. It wasn't just her words that had moved him. It was the way she lived her life. She didn't have to chase after anything, happiness, success, love, because she had already found it in the people around her, in the relationships she nurtured, and in the moments she shared with those she cared about. John had begun to wonder whether it was too late for him to change. He had spent so much time building his empire, chasing after wealth and power, that he had lost sight of what really mattered. But now, with Sarah's influence, he was starting to see things differently. She had a quiet strength, an inner peace that he found both comforting and inspiring. One evening, as they sat together at their usual cafe, John couldn't shake the thought that had been lingering in his mind for weeks. It was a decision that had been slowly taking shape, but now, sitting across from Sarah, he knew it was time to act. "Sarah," he began, his voice hesitant but sincere, "I've been thinking a lot about my life lately, about the direction I'm going in. I realized I've been living in a way that doesn't make me happy. I've been chasing after things that aren't important, and I've been neglecting the things that really matter." Sarah looked at him, her expression soft and understanding. "John, it's never too late to change. We all have the power to choose a different path, to start over." Her words resonated with him deeply. It was exactly what he needed to hear. He had been so caught up in the pursuit of success that he had forgotten the true meaning of happiness. But now, with Sarah's encouragement, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. "I think I want to step away from everything," he said, his voice steady. "I want to live a life that's more than just about business deals and numbers. I want to find something real, something meaningful. I want to focus on what truly matters: love, connection, family." Sarah smiled warmly at him, her eyes filled with pride. "I think that's the best decision you could make, John. It's about finding balance, about living a life that brings you peace." For the first time in a long time, John felt a sense of relief. The weight that had been hanging over him for so long seemed to lift. He knew he had made the right choice. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to embrace it, to create a new life that was rooted in love, purpose, and genuine connection. The next few days were a blur as John made arrangements to step back from his business ventures. He sold off a few of his properties, scaled down his company, and took a leave of absence from his high-powered position. It wasn't easy. The world he had built was one of luxury, power, and prestige. But he knew it was the right thing to do. As he focused more on his personal life, John began spending more time with Sarah and her family. He was no longer the distant, cold businessman. He had learned to appreciate the simple joys of life: family dinners, long walks in the park, and meaningful conversations that didn't revolve around success or wealth. He felt like he was rediscovering himself, like he was finally living the life he had been searching for. One evening, after a long day spent with Sarah's family, John found himself alone with her in the living room. They were sitting on the couch, enjoying a quiet moment together, when he took a deep breath and turned to her. "Sarah," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "I want to thank you for everything. You've changed my life in ways I can't even describe. You've shown me that there's so much more to life than just chasing after success. You've taught me what really matters, and for that, I'll be forever grateful." Sarah looked at him, her expression tender. "You don't have to thank me, John. I'm just glad I could be here for you. You've always had the potential to be so much more than the life you were living. I'm proud of you for making this change." John reached for her hand, his heart full. "I don't think I could have done it without you, Sarah. You've been my guide, my support. I'm not sure where this journey will take us, but I know I want to walk it with you." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "I'm with you every step of the way, John." In that moment, John realized that he had found something far more valuable than wealth or power. He had found love, real love, and it was the kind of love that could change everything. As the weeks turned into months, John's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. He had stepped away from his high-powered career and embraced a life that focused on the things that truly mattered: love, connection, and family. It hadn't been easy, but with Sarah by his side, he felt empowered to face any challenge that came his way. John had begun working with Sarah's family, helping them with small businesses and community projects. It was a far cry from the corporate world he once inhabited, but it brought him an incredible sense of fulfillment. He was no longer consumed by the demands of running a multi-million-dollar company. Instead, he was giving back to the people who had shown him the true meaning of life, the ones who cared about something deeper than just money. One evening, as the sun began to set, John and Sarah sat together on the porch of her family's home. The warm glow of the setting sun painted the sky with shades of pink and orange, creating the perfect atmosphere for a quiet conversation. "Sarah," John said, his voice soft but sincere, "I've never felt more at peace in my life than I do right now. I feel like I've found my true purpose, something that has nothing to do with the wealth or success I once chased after." Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. "I'm so proud of you, John. You've come such a long way. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but you did it, and you're living the life you deserve." John reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my guide through this journey, showing me that there's more to life than just ambition and success. You've given me the courage to pursue something real." Sarah squeezed his hand, her smile widening. "You've always had it in you, John. You just needed to find the right path." As they sat together in silence, John couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey he had been on. It wasn't just about the changes he had made in his life. It was about the people he had met along the way, especially Sarah. She had helped him see that there was so much more to life than the empty pursuits he had once thought were important. But there was something more, something he had been feeling for some time now, something that had been building inside him ever since he met Sarah. It wasn't just gratitude or admiration for her. It was love. Deep, genuine love. He had fallen in love with Sarah, and he knew that now, more than ever, he was ready to tell her how he felt. "Sarah," he began, his heart racing, "there's something I've been meaning to say to you for a while now. Something I've been holding back because I wasn't sure if the time was right. But now, sitting here with you, I know that I can't keep it inside anymore." Sarah turned to him, her expression curious but warm. "What is it, John?" John took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I love you, Sarah. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." For a moment, there was silence. The world seemed to hold its breath as Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening. And then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "I love you too, John," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I've loved you for a long time. I just never knew if you felt the same way." John felt a rush of relief wash over him. The weight that had been hanging over him for so long, the fear of rejection, seemed to melt away in that moment. He had finally said the words he had been holding back, and Sarah had answered in kind. It was everything he had hoped for. They leaned in and kissed, the kiss gentle but full of meaning. In that moment, everything felt right. John knew that he had finally found what he had been searching for, not in the boardrooms or the flashy parties, but in the quiet moments shared with someone who truly understood him. As they pulled away, Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "You've come so far, John. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you," he replied. "You showed me the way, and now I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." The future stretched out before them, a bright and promising road. They didn't know exactly where it would lead, but they were ready to face it together side by side. In the weeks that followed, John and Sarah's relationship grew even stronger. They continued to work together, building a future that was full of love, purpose, and fulfillment. John had found a new sense of purpose, one that was not defined by wealth or status, but by the love he shared with Sarah and the happiness he had discovered in living a meaningful life. He had learned that true success wasn't measured in dollars or accolades. It was measured in the connections we make, the love we give, and the impact we have on the world around us. And for John, he had found everything he needed in Sarah. She was his partner, his equal, and the love of his life.